Why do modern boxers today, or new school boxers, why do they not make use of the jab as much as guys, throwback guys from the past? They hardly use the jab, he said. So I'm going to try and answer this question as simply as possible. But if you want a little bit more detailed analysis, a little bit more something for your day, check the community section. I tried to just put in, I only put in 5 slides, but just 5 slides of sort of potential things that fighters do today. So the first thing I need to say is the jab is still one of the fundamental tools and weapons in boxing. Okay? It is a very important weapon, it's a very important tool. Having said that, a guy who frequently jabs doesn't make him the most effective boxer out there. So, one of the most important things in boxing is not being very predictable. Once you get your opponent's respect, the next thing you want to do is have them guessing. I don't care what style of fighting you have, you want them guessing. And the key to that is, and this is the first thing that a lot of fighters use, and that's why they don't use the jab, it's just one of many weapons, is feinting. Feinting, when you can get guys to bite on your feints, like Alexander Usyk did with Anthony Joshua, it's good. You start to already get an advantage. So that's the first thing that you can rely on. Once you've established a feint, you can use that. That's a tool in the tool bag. The second thing that you can utilize is what we call the lead hand. Now, the lead hand simply means the hand that's closest to your opponent, but it's not only the hand that's closest to your opponent, but it's the hand that you tend to lead your combinations, your punches off of. So it's called the lead hand. Okay, it's closest to your opponent if you're an orthodox fighter. If you're a southpaw fighter, it's going to be here. So you see it's closer to my opponent than my backhand, which you can't even see. I'm going to try and, there you go, there's my backhand. So you see my lead hand was way in front here with my backhand because I have a stance on one side of me is closer to my opponent than the other. If you're a squared up fighter, on the other hand, some guys fight square up, okay? Then both hands are equal distance, and therefore the lead hand is whatever hand you throw. Julio Cesar Chavez, to cut off the ring, he square up on his opponents, and he would throw his lead hands. I'm giving you from this angle, okay? So he could throw the right hand or the left hand. Tito Trinidad squared up on his opponents, okay, walk into them like this, so he could throw his right hand or his left hand, okay? So once you understand that, now, Tito still had a good jab. Julio Cesar Chavez did most of his work on the inside. Of course, jabbing doesn't hurt because jabbing protects you as you're coming in. When you are throwing a jab, it can protect you. If you stay behind your shoulder of your jab as you're throwing your jab, you're protected coming in because your opponent has to be on the defense, one. And two, if they try to counter you, you kind of have a defense with your jab. But to answer your question a little bit more fully, therefore fighters can lead off of either hand. Now, before you try to lead anything or do any kind of offense, one of the things you need to know is what's coming back at you. So you should be able to slip punches. And fighters today slip punches a lot better than some fighters of yesteryear. Because what fighters of yesteryear used to do was the battle of the jabs. So a guy would fundamentally stay behind his jab and pop his jab at his opponent would pop back a jab at him. But now, in the modern age of boxing, even though there was some of that back in the day as well, with the exceptional fighters, but most fighters, they'd use their jab on each other. Now, the further back you go in boxing is actually, it's interesting because the further back you go in boxing, you will see that some fighters never use the jab at all. They start off with a lead left hook, or they start off with a lead right hand. So, like, if you go back to the times of guys like Mickey, oh, God damn it. I just can't remember his name for nothing right now. But what was called the Toy Bulldog times the Ted Kid Lewis, you know, those guys didn't quite use jabs. They just initiate with the lead hand and just go with left hooks, or sometimes like guys like Jimmy McLaren, they actually use jabs. Okay, Jimmy McLaren stayed behind his jab, but you know, it's strange. Boxing really has evolved so much. You would have no idea how guys used to fight and everything was just totally different, and guys would lead with whatever hand they felt like leading with. And today, guys have a science to how they lead. If you lead with the right hand, why you lead with the right hand? You may lead with a hook, okay, a left hook. You may lead with a right hook. You may lead with an uppercut. Okay, it's risky, but you could do it given situations, given the angle you're at. So some guys get themselves in position before they start throwing punches. So it depends. You know, the modern fighters today have utilized a lot of other tools besides just the jab. And defensively, fighters today, they like to slip a lot of punches before they start boxing and doing their thing. So they like to neutralize the jab. A lot of fighters like to neutralize jabs. They like to counter jabs. As such, because a guy can counter your jab, you don't want to be too predictable with your jab. So that's why a lot of modern fighters today, they don't jab as much. I mean, guys who are good jabbers are like Gennady Golovkin. He gets countered because, you know, he uses his jab sort of like his major weapon to have defense. And you can't just have your jab as a major weapon of defense. But there were some great fighters who really were good jabbers, like Ezra Charles was a very good jabber. Strong jab, but it wasn't just a jab he had. And he moved a certain way with his jab. But Jersey Joe Walker was still able to knock his ass out. And Jersey Joe Walker wasn't a great jabber. That wasn't his thing, you know. And then there are many different kinds of jabs. Okay, so you know, and you can execute a jab several different ways. The same jab several different ways. So there's a lot of variety to jabbing. And as Andre Wood would tell you, you don't want to be predictable. You don't want to just be throwing the same jab, you know, strong jab, but probably at the same speed or the same rhythm or the same height. You know, you don't want to do that because you're going to get timed. And once you get timed, that's it. You're going to get countered. So in boxing, you know, the guys who jab very often, Sugar Ray Robinson used to jab very often. Vladimir Klitschko used to jab very often. Sugar Ray Leonard jabbed very often. These boxers had exceptional skills, talents, and abilities, and they had subtleties to their jabs. And they dominated for a while. But if you look, Sugar Ray Leonard was beaten by Terry Norris, who he was a good boxer, but he didn't depend on his jab. That wasn't the only tool he had. If you look at Colonel Whitaker depended on his jab, but if you look at boxers like Roy Jones Jr., if you look at boxers like James Toney, if you look at boxers like Roberto Duran, if you look at boxers like Floyd Mayweather, if you look at boxers like Manny Pacquiao, if you look at boxers like Canelo Alvarez, the jab is a tool, but it is not the only weapon. So to answer your question very carefully, the more important thing is the lead hand and the lead foot in boxing today. So new school modern boxers, they do all kinds of crazy things. Aaron Pryor was very special because he knew how to use the lead hand and the lead foot, whether he was aware of it or not. And right now I'm getting disturbance because somebody decided to make noise in the area. I'm not too sure why and how close they are to me, but yeah. He was able to use the lead hand and the lead foot to do a lot of things. And I mean, if you're dealing with southpaws, for example, the lead hand is going to be the right hand, not the left hand. You get a clear shot against your opponent if you're an orthodox fighter. If you're a southpaw, then your lead hand would be your left hand for a lot of things, because we're going to use that tool quite a lot. So it's not so much jabbing. Even in the southpaw, you more hook than you do anything. Now you set up the jab, you will still throw some jabs, but it's not a clear pathway. It's not easy to land the jab as a southpaw. Even though you saw Usyk doing it, the jab basically was setting up for the right hook, and it was only mostly as a variation, meaning he really want to land the left hand, the straight left. But the jab distracts you or keeps your opponent occupied so that you can catch him with the left hand or the right hook. You could always, hook off the jab. So, whereas back in Sugar Ray Robinson's time, or Sugar Ray Leonard's time, Carlos Monzon's time, these were guys who were good jabbers. Um, you know, the jab was a really effective tool. You find like Marvin Hagler, even though he would jab a guy sometimes in one stance because he was a switch hitter, he could actually switch hit and not jab, but instead use his lead hand or his power hand to do what he wants to do. Miguel Cotto was a very good jabber as well, but Miguel Cotto would switch to southpaw to land his power punch, which was, of course, his jabbing hand. Of course, you had Oscar De La Hoya was a great jabber as well. So there are a number of great jabbers. I mean, if you look at Canelo's faced a lot of great jabbers. And ultimately, in the end, it really doesn't matter because Canelo beat them. So it's not about just being a great jabber, or being somebody who frequently uses the jab or depends on the jab, as some fighters really do depend on the jab. So we call it special effects, where fighters can do other things besides just jab, and again, it has to do with feinting, it has to do with changing levels. Go watch the community section, you'll see what I'm talking about, slipping shots, rolling shots, and all of that stuff. I took counter. So to counter the jab. So if you're a great jabber, I'm going to take away your jab by countering it. So certain counter punches, not all counter punches, but certain counter punches are able to disable a guy's jab, to take away his greatest weapon, his jab, then to see what else he has below that. So fighters like Floyd Mayweather, fighters like Manny Pacquiao, fighters like Canelo Alvarez, they take away your weapons and see what you have. And then they'll take your weapons and use them against you. That's what Floyd did to Oscar De La Hoya. That's what he did to Miguel Cotto. Canelo does this all the time as well. This is the new school fighters, if you want to call Floyd a new school fighter. He's kind of old school. But the new school fighters, they're able to take away your best weapons. They study you. They take away your best weapons from you and see what you got otherwise. We're going to peel back some other layers and see what else you have to show for you, show for the fight. So it's a little bit different now than it was back in the day. And all of this just to let you know that boxing is a sport evolved. So that's why you don't see modern day fighters just jabbing all the time. They don't jab, they frequently jab. But when they do use the jab, it's a key weapon. It's either a key offensive weapon, it's a weapon to get to the inside of a fighter, or it's a key defensive weapon. You look at Jamal Charlo, how he knocked out Jason Rosario with a jab, right? So, it's a potent weapon. But you notice that Jamal Charlo didn't use the jab all night long. Tony Tucker wasn't. I talk about Mike Tyson versus Tony Tucker. Tony Tucker wasn't a jabber either. He jabbed, but he didn't jab. He wasn't like the jab was a key weapon all the time. Against Mike Tyson, he jabbed some. He rolled punches. He rolled under punches. He ride punches. He countered Mike Tyson. He even countered Mike Tyson's jab. And that's the way how you get respect with guys. When he caught Mike Tyson with the uppercut coming in off his jab, you have to be able to be versatile. It's not just about getting your rhythm. Some guys get their rhythm off a jab. That's why they throw the jab so much. Don't try to get rhythm off the jab. The rhythm that you have is in your feet. You see, your rhythm, you get your rhythm from your stance and your feet. You understand? So that's how you do it. And if you're somebody who pivots a lot, then you can vary the rhythm. You can vary the pace of the rhythm. You can vary the tempo of the rhythm. And with guys who pivot, why are they able to do a lot more than guys who bounce and prance around the ring like horses is because they're able to feint movements. They're able to feint like they're going to go one way and then they go another way. James Toney was showing us that. Floyd Mayweather does that a lot. Okay, so it's all of that sort of intricate stuff that is why guys don't jab so much. I mean, if you're just You know, if you're on the elementary level, the fundamental level, you always begin with a jab. You should stick behind your jab. When you're learning boxing. But as you get to the higher levels, you learn that it's not the jab, but it's the lead hand that really counts. That once you have a lead hand in play, then that can help you to dictate or control a fight. But it's about the lead hand, not so much the jab. The lead hand, you could lead with whatever hand, but your choice of lead would depend on what your opponent's doing. So I hope that helps somewhat for people to understand why a lot of new school fighters today don't jab as often as like the old school guys do. But they still use the jab. It's still a fundamental tool. It's something that's always at the disposal. It's best for you as a fighter not to depend on your jab as the only tool that you are good at using. Paulie Malignaggi lived and died by a jab, but that don't win you fights all the time, especially if you're dealing with a counterpuncher or a skill fighter or a pressure fighter who your jab is not deterring. So you have to have more weapons than just a jab, but it can carry you quite a way. What you need. I hope you guys have a good one. Peace.